Welcome to the Owens Corning Residential Wall Bats Installation Module. Now that you have easy access to the bats, you can begin installing. Let's begin with exterior walls and face bats. Remember the dimensions you saw on the packaging? Pink fiberglass bats are pre-cut to fit most typical residential wall sizes. Different widths are made to fit typical 16, 19 1/4, or 24-inch wall spacing. And pieces are typically pre-cut 93 inches long to fit standard 8-foot high wall cavities. Owens Corning also have bats that are pre-cut to 105 inches to fit 9-foot high walls. These pre-cut pieces make installation a breeze. Simply hold the bat at one end with a facing toward the inside of the room. Place it flush into the top of the cavity with no gaps. Then push it firmly into the wall. Tug at the bottom to be certain the bat fits snugly with no wrinkles, gaps, or spaces. This will ensure that the insulation delivers its full R value and inspectors look for full cavities. The facing is installed toward the inside since the roll is facing toward the warm in winter space. Then staple the facing flange every 8 to 12 inches to secure it in place. There are two methods of stapling the flanges in place: inset stapling and face stapling. When inset stapling, you will staple the flange to the inside of each stud, being certain that the edge of the flange is even with the face of the stud. When face stapling, you will cover the stud face with a flange and staple it flat against the stud face. Very often the method you use will be specified by the builder. The advantage of inset stapling is that it makes the installation of sheetrock easier. When you're finished, check the facing for cuts or tears. If you spot any, cover them with Build-R tape or other waterproof tape. At times, you may need to cut a bat for spaces that are shorter or narrower than normal. In fact, nearly 50% of bats are cut to fit these types of spaces. These can occur above or below windows or in corners with narrower stud widths. It is easier to measure and cut the insulation on the floor. And always cut with a facing side down. Keep your knife blade sharp for cleaner, easier cuts. As you insulate residential walls, you'll have to accommodate plumbing, wiring, electrical boxes, and ducts. Around wiring, you can either split the bat from the bottom like this and push half the bat behind the wire, or you can slit the bat on the back and tuck it around the wiring. When it comes to plumbing located in exterior walls, cut a slit in the bat and surround the pipe with insulation so it doesn't freeze in cold weather. If you have to, stuff small spaces with scraps of insulation using pieces of unfaced bats. Make a close-fitting cutout around electrical boxes. Stuff the piece you have to cut out behind the boxes. Also, be sure to insulate around and behind air ducts or whenever there is an open space. No cavity in the wall should be left unfilled. With your screwdriver or putty knife, use scraps of unfaced insulation to fill gaps around windows, doors, or other seams. This process is called chinking. Another easier and faster way to insulate residential walls is with Owens Corning FastBat. This product is craft-faced, but does not have flanges, so it allows you to avoid the time and effort that goes into stapling every bat in place. This means you can install FastBats at least 20% faster than standard bats. The unique design allows you to friction fit the bats into the walls just as you would with unfaced insulation. Simply place the bat in the cavity, gently tuck the edges on the craft paper into the cavity, and smooth the facing. It doesn't get any easier than that. No stapling is required. Be certain that the facing is snug against the wall studs to provide a good, tight vapor retarder. If the job calls for the use of unfaced bats, most of the insulation process is the same. Notice that one side of the bat has an R value printed on the insulation surface. Be sure to install unfaced bats with the R value facing the interior of the room. This is necessary to allow the inspector to confirm that the proper R value has been installed. In most climates, you will need to install a separate vapor retarder over the unfaced insulation. Just as with craft facing, this polyethylene vapor retarder goes toward the warm in winter side of the house. Begin by stapling in the corners. leaving some overlap so moisture can't get through. Staple along the top plate and the bottom plate every 2 feet or so. Pull the poly tight as you go. Also staple the center of each stud all around the room. Overlap separate pieces of poly by 1 full stud width. This will help make sure that you have a continuous and complete vapor retarder around the entire living space. Carefully check the poly film for cuts or tears. Repair any damage with Build-R tape or other waterproof construction tape. Insulating interior walls for noise is very similar to insulating exterior walls for heat and cold. In this case, you will probably want to use Owens Corning's acoustical insulation Quiet Zone. Again, start by caulking and sealing any holes for wires around wall penetrations and the other seams of construction, because anywhere air can leak through, noise can leak through as well. Like thermal insulation bats, Quiet Zone acoustic bats are pre-cut to fit standard wall sizes. Make sure each Quiet Zone bat fills the entire wall cavity, fitting snugly from top to bottom, with no gaps or wrinkles. Split around wiring just as you learned from the exterior walls, by splitting the bat or slitting the bat. And finally, if using craft face Quiet Zone bats, inset staple the craft flange of the bats at least every 8 to 12 inches along the studs. One trick that certainly makes a good-looking job is to install all of the bats with the printing right side up. As one inspector recently told us, neatness counts. This means a good-looking job is much more likely to pass inspection and saves you any rework. Finally, clean up the scraps of wood and other debris. You may want to use the poly bags or the unit sleeves for trash containers. Give it a quick once-over with a broom, and you've got a finished job that you can be proud of. With the careful use of the techniques and tips that you've been given in this video, you will enhance your value to both your company and your customers.